Welcome everybody. Sorry for getting a little crazy with the puppy time, but it's just, we just can't help it.
And it's Friday.
It is, and it feels really like, man, I don't know. Has it felt like to you guys that it's been a really stressful week?
Yeah.
It's been intense.
Very.
Yeah. And I mean,
Very.
it's like, it's not like things are going badly, but I don't know. I think there's something in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So what I want to let our attendees know and update our panelists on what our plan is for Mastermind for 2021. And actually, this should help you reduce your stress because we are really going to try and take care of all those little problems this year that you have with your business and you don't know how to fix them. And so our Mastermind series has been such an amazing resource with so many experts and so many mentors, and you ladies are our core mentors every Friday, and we're so grateful to have you. And so what we want to do this year is actually divide the topics up so that you can actually know what week we're going to be talking about what subject. So for instance, this is the last Friday of the month, but every fourth Friday of the month, we're going to be talking about business issues. Like, today we're going to do an overview, but we're going to talk about, intellectual property, contracts, financials, how to raise money, all these different things in depth with experts throughout the year. So that you will actually, so we can get very granular with some of these topics. And then the second Friday of the month is going to be all about marketing. And then the third Friday of the month is going to be all about sustainability. And that's going to include technology that's helping to reduce our carbon footprint in the industry, but also, the more traditional, how to find what you need kind of thing. But then the first Friday of the month, we're going to have member networking. And so all of our featured and VIP members are able to actually join the webinar, and basically everybody will get to introduce themselves and say what they're looking for. And we did this for Text World last July, and it just really went off great because we had like 45 people, and we will have to cap it at about 30 because 45 people took an hour and a half. But so we'll cap it at 30. But if you are a featured or VIP member, you're welcome to come. And if you would like to be on these networking webinars, you can, of course, as a free member, always be on chat and engage, as normal. But if you'd like to actually be on the webinar and be featured, then you can upgrade to the fashion directory level in our platform, and you can upgrade to featured or VIP. So we'll be sending more information out about that. But next Friday will actually be our first one. So it went really, really well when we did it for Text World. So we really want to start doing it for our members. So let's get started. So we know everybody's always struggling with how to understand with how to, set up their business legally, financially. These can be very complicated issues. And if you make the wrong decisions, you can really have some very unexpected consequences. And so I know me personally, I really, really hate anything in this area. But when I started my business, I was like, oh, I have no choice. And I have been lucky enough that I have been able to hire experts like Shirin to take care of things. I've got a CPA. We try to maintain our books ourselves, but we do have a CPA that reconciles the accounts and all that. But it's a hard thing to know what to do and to know when to invest your money. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about what is the right legal structure for you. Many people who are in the independent fashion industry are sole proprietors, but you need to know when should you be an LLC, when should be an S corp, when should you be a corporation. And then we also want to talk about trademarking your business name and logo, and also a little bit about insurance. So we're going to run through these topics, fairly high level today, and then we'll get into them more on the each one individually on the fourth Friday of each month. So whatever you're struggling with in your business right now, please start thinking about a question, put it in chat, and we'll go through it together. So first of all, I wanted to, the core thing, like when I started Fashion Mingle, the first thing I had to figure out was my legal business structure, because before I had Fashion Mingle, I was had a web development business, and I just operated it as a sole proprietor. But because I got an investor to start Fashion Mingle, I had to have a corporation. So Shirin, can you talk to us about what these business structures are, and at what point do you need different business entities?
Thanks, Melissa. Absolutely. Now, before we go any further, I just want to say, and Melissa sort of got into it at the beginning when she was talking about her story, and I would love to learn more about it, and I think it'll be helpful to everyone as well, is when you are starting your business, you need to understand why you're doing it. And that why is incredibly critical, because that's what's going to help pull you through when you want to give up. And these ladies can all tell you about times when they wanted to give up on their businesses. And, the key is that success is reached by those who know their why and they keep going. So be authentic with yourself in determining what your why is. And then once you figure that out, you're one step closer to achieving your dreams and the goals for your business. So that's something that you all can sort of start thinking about. And I'm sure you all have a reason why, but it's great to put it down on paper, because that's really what you need to start reminding yourself of when times get tough. So now that you know your why, or hopefully you're starting to think about your why, let's set up your business entity. And there's two key benefits to setting up your business entity. One is liability protection, and two is tax protection. Now, liability has to do with protecting your personal assets from your business. And tax is about saving you taxes, actually. So by setting up the entity in the right way, you can actually legally shield yourself from your business and some of the issues that might come up in your business. Now, deciding where to register your business, it'll come down to where you're going to operate your business. So for example, if you're just offering products or services virtually, so you have an e-commerce platform, then you could consider registering in a state like Delaware or Nevada, and take advantage of their asset protection laws and their tax savings. But if you are actually providing services in a particular state like New York, then you're going to still have to register to do business in that state. And you'll need to obviously follow their state asset protection and tax laws. So regardless of where you register, you still will get benefits of liability protection and tax savings. It just depends on that state's, rules, and some have greater benefits. So now, with respect to the structure, as Melissa mentioned, there's the sole proprietor, which is not technically an official business structure. It's basically a one-person business. So unlike a corporation or a limited liability company, which we'll get into, a sole proprietor doesn't have to register with the state in order to exist. So by you just having a business and being a sole owner, you are ergo the sole proprietor. And you don't need to have a business identification number or anything like that. You can basically operate as your own, through your own entity, and doing business. Now, I definitely don't recommend that because, as Melissa mentioned, when you do have investors, they're obviously going to want to have the tax liability, the tax protection and the liability protection. So they're going to need you to formalize that structure into a registered business entity. And that comes in generally two forms: the LLC, which is the limited liability company, and the corporation. You may hear the term S Corp or C Corp. It's all the same thing. So registration wise, the entity is either a corporation, which has shareholders as owners, or an LLC, which has members as owners. And they're slightly, modified structure internally, but for tax purposes, an LLC is a pass-through entity. So the company doesn't actually get taxed. It's the individuals that run the company. So if it's just you, it would be you, filing your taxes and whatever income you receive, then you would file it with your tax return. Or if it's a corporation, then the corporation files its own separate tax. And then the shareholders would receive a salary from the corporation. So there's a little bit of difference. But the benefits, basically, I would say generally, I know a lot of times people have heard that the LLC is better. That's not necessarily true. And it really comes down to your state and what you're doing. So I highly recommend that you speak to a tax advisor in your state about what the benefits of and what the tax what the taxes are for the different entity structures. So generally, I would say the S corporation gives you greater tax savings because here you have a corporate structure. So you have an entity, and then you would be considered an employee. You would get paid a salary, and you would only pay taxes on the salary that you're getting paid. But with an LLC, 100% of that revenue is subject to self-employment tax at the rate of 15%. So you're not able to minimize that exposure, whereas with an S Corp, you could limit, say, your salary that you're taking and only pay for that salary. So there are tax benefits to S corporations, but I will say there's a caveat to that. And that's why I say it's important to speak to your particular state tax advisor, because in a state like New York, S corporations are actually taxed at a higher rate. So depending on, what your services are, it's actually more beneficial to be an LLC in the state of New York. So again, it all depends on what you're doing, how much you're going to be earning, and what state you're providing those services in. So it's really important to talk to a tax advisor and making sure you understand the tax consequences of the different structures. But yeah, that's really, again, it all comes down to knowing, what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be providing those services, and how to take advantage of the tax laws in that state.
Yeah, we definitely had to go all in when we formed Fashion Mingle, because we had the investor. And even though our investor was in New York, we knew that eventually we'd go for more investors. So we actually set it up as a Delaware corporation. So we're registered in Delaware, but also we're registered in New York. And our CPA takes care of the filing and stuff. And so it's really not anything I ever have to really think about, which I'm extremely grateful about. But let me bring in the panel, because I'd love to know how you guys are operating your business. So Dale, I know you own True Model Management. That's a really large company. Are you a corporation, or what's your business entity?
We are an S Corp right now. When there are kind of two True Model Managements. When I first started True, it was only to represent me, and it was an LLC. And then I did that for a few years, and then there were some things that going on at the time that it was better for us to transfer over at the time. Right
now, did we lose Dale?
She's frozen a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Probably be better for an LLC.
Okay, we got you back.
Okay.
Say it again.
Oh, I was saying when I first started True that it was an LLC and it was only representing me. And then over the years, when it morphed into a management company managing others, we had separated out and started almost the same name with an incorporation, and we're an S Corp right now.
Okay. And so how about you, Dee? Now you have a PR agency. What business entity did you set up?
So we first started as a DBA, do business as, when we did, it was under D and Co Group, because we kind of wanted to navigate like where we were going to go before we kind of went for the other level. But for tax purposes, for many other things, we changed it to DCG Media Group LLC, and it has worked really well for us. Under, all the other things that we do under that umbrella.
Okay. Now, Kat, you've got your fingers in lots of pots.
Right. I operate under the pies are under a big entity, not a big entity, but it's an umbrella entity called Catherine Schuler Enterprises LLC. So
Okay.
then everything else falls under that. And then when I work with people independently, I have them come on as independent consultants. So I don't have a payroll. I don't have people that I do the payroll. And then when I work with Divabetic, they're a 501(c)(3), so I'm an independent consultant for them too. So and they give me a 1099 at the end of the year for all the things that I do. So I keep it pretty simple, and I have an EIN number. I have a bank account with Catherine Schuler Enterprises, and that's it. It kind of all the other umbrellas, the Model Maker Mentors, everything I do comes under that.
Okay, awesome. So that we've heard several acronyms here, the DBA, the EIN. I wanted to quickly go through those. So Shirin, tell us what a DBA is and when you need one.
Yes. So a DBA is simply doing business as, and it's when the name it operates is different from its legal registered name. So it's like a fictitious name or an assumed name, as Dee mentioned. So she originally had it as a company doing business as, and so that business as entity was the one that was actually doing the transactions and the name that she would advertise. So it's a way to protect your identity essentially. And there's two big reasons why you would do a DBA. And one of them is for that reason. If you're a sole proprietor, then you can have a DBA. So it's different than your own name. So Dee Rivera doing business as Dee and Co Group. So she sort of protects her personal identity by having it run as a business. And of course, it looks more professional when you're running it as a business as opposed to as your own. And for LLCs and corporations, a DBA will let you operate more than one business without having to form multiple corporation entities, such as Catherine mentioned. So you can have different streams and different projects that you're working on and have DBAs registered for different ones and still maintain them under one major, umbrella corporation. Although I will say that can get complex and you may be losing out on tax advantages, tax benefits. And when I say tax benefits, what I mean is tax deductions. So you'll be losing out because your DBA is not officially separating your entities. It's just keeping them in different names, but your tax wise, you're filing it as one big entity. And so if, say, for instance, one of your businesses didn't do so well and you have losses, those losses, instead of carrying them forward, you're going to have to apply it and to other businesses, so you don't get the benefits of some of the tax deductions and carry forwards. So and of course, if you have too many of them, they can be an accountant's nightmare. So I don't know.
Yeah, I have to tell people,
Catherine can tell you about that.
Make sure it says Catherine Schuler Enterprises, not Runway the Real Way, not because they send me a check paid to the order of, and it's like it comes under Catherine Schuler Enterprises. So when I send my invoice, I always say, please make the check out too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to keep those, separated. And a lot of people that are doing business with you, they may not understand that, the importance of it.
Yeah,
But
no,
really
it's
for
right
you
out there.
internally and your bookkeeper, it is very important to keep a track of where your incomes are coming from, where your different streams of income are coming from. So for a DBA, you'll lose out if you just use DBAs for your different ventures. And also just something to highlight, given the pandemic and issues that we've been dealing with in helping businesses file for their PPPs and EIDL loans. If you're just doing it under one, guess what? You're not going to get the benefit of all those different businesses, because again, they're all done under one business. So if you had multiple businesses, you could have applied for each of those different businesses to get aid.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So again, another benefit that you're going to be losing out on. So it's definitely worth thinking about and planning what the costs and benefits are of doing a DBA as opposed to setting up a new entity for that new stream of business. Now, EIN, so that's basically your business social insurance number. That's how social security number. It's a 9-digit number, and it's used to identify your business and other entities like trusts, like 501c3s, nonprofits. They have to have EIN numbers. And it basically helps that business file taxes, make payroll payments. So you need it for reporting purposes. And a big reason to have it, now not everyone needs it. If you're a single member LLC, so it's just you don't need to have it. You can file taxes under your own social security number. And also if you're a sole proprietor, you also don't need it, but I would definitely recommend having it. You can still apply for one, even if you're a sole proprietor and you haven't technically registered with the state. You can still register to get an EIN number. And I recommend that because first, it helps protect your identity. The last thing you want to do is give people your social security number if you're an independent contractor, you're going to have to fill out a W-9. So when you're filling out W-9s, handing people your social security number, obviously it's more likely, privacy issues and things like that. The other thing, and the most important thing, it helps build business credit. And that's something we'll get into later in money management. But business credit is the ultimate credit that you aspire as a business owner to have. And at the beginning, most small businesses are going to rely on their own personal credit. Banks and other lending institutions are not going to give you, even if you have a business established, they're not going to give you, a business credit unless it's guaranteed by your own personal credit. But as you start building business credit, and you do that by continuously, obviously generating revenue under the EIN number, so there's history with your EIN number, that's going to help obviously get you business credit, which is not reliant on your personal credit and also does not require a guarantee. Therefore, if something should ever happen to your business and you have business credit, well, if you were to file bankruptcy, you could walk away with that without being personally liable for the business expenses. So again, it's a huge bonus for businesses to start building business credit. So even if you don't need to get an EIN number, if you're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, I would definitely recommend you getting it and building your business credit.
So now I got mine through my CPA. My daughter, who owns a fitness business, she used LegalZoom and bought a package, and the EIN came with that. How is there any other way to get an EIN number?
Directly from the IRS. IRS has a website. You can search it, SSS form. You can even do it online. If you qualify, if you're a US resident, you can do it online. If you're not a US resident, then you have to fill out the SSS form and then mail it in. And then it takes a while actually to get your EIN. But online, you can go there, fill it up. It's free. And you'll get it instantly. You don't need anyone to help you get an EIN number. No, absolutely
not. My daughter actually asked me, because she got a big corporate contract and they were ready to sign, but they needed her EIN number. And this was like the first time she'd ever done a contract like this. And so she asked me how to get one. It's like, I don't know. My CPA got it for me. And so she did get on LegalZoom and was able to get a package, but I didn't know that she could have just gone right to the IRS to get it.
Can I say something too? What
Mhm.
Shirin said is true. I'm going to be honest. LegalZoom, I mean, I would never recommend LegalZoom because LegalZoom screwed me when I first started. It screwed my trademark. It screwed everything. And it's really important to go through a lawyer. Even if you have to find somebody that works with small businesses, get a real lawyer to file things for you because
Mhm.
LegalZoom will mess you up.
Yeah. Okay. That's really good to know. We'll talk when we do our financial session, our contract session. Well, I don't know, maybe LegalZoom is going to be relevant because there's also Rocket Lawyer. So I think we should definitely talk about the pros and cons because they have a lot of different services
Yeah.
and it looks super easy. But yeah,
A lot of them are fraudulent, and when you go to apply to them and then they go back to your bank, they won't clear it because they know it's a fraudulent. I've tried to do that because I had to change my address to the mansion, and I went on this USPS site, and it was a fraudulent site, even though it said USPS. And my bank wouldn't take you have to do like $1 deposit or something to prove it.
Wow.
They wouldn't take it, and they said it was a fraudulent site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are fake trademark companies. They'll say, "Oh, we'll help you trademark." You file it with them, but it doesn't really get filed at the USPTO.gov. It's where you go. But again, don't do it yourself. Go to a lawyer because again, I went through that. Try to do it myself. Put on my lawyer hat. And I had to pay double because I had to pay the lawyer to do the corrections because it's category, it's a lot, it's a whole ball of wax.
Yeah. Okay. Well, definitely Trademarks was next on the list, but I want to get in. Audrey has a question. She wants to know, can you use multiple entities with one EIN number or should you get multiple EIN numbers?
As we mentioned, if you have multiple DBAs under one entity, so if you have an LLC or a corporation, and then you have multiple DBAs for different types of businesses within that, then you can just use the one EIN number that you get for that entity. And of course, you can have more than one if you end up separating those entities into their own legal structures. So if you have DBAs, then you can use all under one umbrella EIN number. And if you have multiple entities, then of course you'll have more than one, but you can't have more than one EIN number per entity, per legal structure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So so let's go to trademarking your business name and logo. So I've had some experience with this in a variety of ways. When I had my web development business, I would get a client who every once in a while, something would come up. We build them a website or we make them logos or whatever. And then like a year later, they'd be like, I got a cease and desist order because I can't use this business name. And that was because they had not done a trademark search. And so, and boy, talk about a mess. I mean, I've a coffee company that I had as a client, it ended up costing them about $5,000 to switch out all of their branding. And they were just a small one coffee shop in one town. And that, $5,000 was a ton of money for them to do all of that switching. So, so Shirin, tell us, I know there's two different kinds of trademarks. There's the graphic one and your business name, and then there's just your business name. And I think with Fashion Mingle, we just did it with the name because I wasn't sure if we were going to change our actual icon. So explain the difference and what it means.
Well, there isn't any. It's just different types of trademarks. So your name, your logo, your symbol, your slogan, those are all things that represent your brand. And those identified as those are identifiable that separate your brand products and services from somebody else's. It's just an identifier. So of course, with Fashion Mingle, you providing networking and, informative services to the fashion community. So in order to protect anyone else from taking that name in use with, because as Dee mentioned, there's two parts to a trademark. One is your name and how you identify yourself in the marketplace. And two, and it could be your name, your symbol, whatever it is that's your identifier. And two is what you're actually selling. What are your products and services? Because you can't just trademark Fashion Mingle everything. It's Fashion Mingle as it relates to those services and classes of service that we applied for. So you need to understand what you're actually providing, and there are multiple classes. So there's over 40, and you need to understand what those classes represent, because if you don't file it right, as Dee mentioned, you're going to pay at least twice to fix the correction. So now you've put in 3 times the money of just getting it done right the first time. And then there's 2 types of registrations. There's registration on the principal register, which is, which is what most people understand. And that is when you have a distinctive name, right? So we got you principal register. Fashion Mingle is very distinctive. It doesn't necessarily describe what it is that you're doing, whereas you would get a supplemental registration if you are very descriptive, like the law firm. That's obviously a very descriptive general name. That doesn't mean that I couldn't register it, but what it means is it's going to go on a different registration. It's a supplemental registration. So people that don't have a very differentiating name could still register their trademarks, but it would be under a different register. So I say this because some people say, oh, well, it's very descriptive and I've been told not to bother registering. No, you should still register your name. You can still reserve your rights to use that name in association with those products and services, and protect yourself. It's just a different register. That's all.
Yeah. And it's a big country. So like if you're on one side of the country and you're operating with your name, and then somebody on the other side of the country starts growing a business using the same name, that could really create a problem for you. And certainly with us, I have to say, like, my biggest worry when I got our trademark was that, because it was to make sure that Christian Mingle didn't send me a cease and desist order because that was like very similar in some ways. I mean, that was a dating app, but we're also a network, and they could be a network. So that was very concerning to me, and that's why I hired a lawyer. Now I have worked with people. I've had clients that have done the trademark all on their own. It's certainly cheaper to do that, but it's laborious. You've got to fill out all the paperwork, and all that. But there was like no way I felt comfortable doing that, and so that's why we went through Shirin to do that. But the thing that I would like, you can actually just Google trademark, USA or whatever. And
USPTO.
Okay. Yeah. The government website will come up, and you can do a search. I mean, the website looks like it was built in about 1998. So they really need to upgrade that look and feel. But you can search to see, if the names that you're thinking about have been taken. If there's a like, I think you can only have it for, you can have your trademark for 10 years, but then after 10 years, if you don't renew it, then it's, available. So 6 years. Okay. So that, I think when you're thinking about the name of your business, definitely go to that website and look it up. But then also look, do a who is search, go like to, you can go to whois.com and just see if the URL's available, because obviously, there's a lot of domain hoarders out there. And so there's a ton, like you might type the domain into this search engine and a website won't come up, but that doesn't mean that that domain is available. So you should always do a who is search to see if it's registered to anybody. That what happened to me with Fashion Mingle was I decided in 2012 to actually, start the business name. And I was trying to figure out what name I should go with. And of course, the URLs were taken for everything under fashion I could possibly imagine. And I ended up having to go with the .net because .com wasn't available, but nobody was using it. So I could see that .net was registered. I could see who it was registered to. But there was no live site. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and go with the .net because we are a network. So as a tech nerd in web development, that totally made sense to me, but it doesn't make sense to anybody else. But what I did immediately was to try and contact that person to see if I could buy the .com. And I never could get a response. I ended up, even after a couple of years, I was like, GoDaddy offered a service for like $75 and they would try to get it for you because it was registered through GoDaddy. They tried for like 6 months, produced nothing. And then out of the blue, in February of last year, someone contacted me and asked me if I wanted to buy it, the .com. And of course they wanted to sell it for $10,000. And I was like, you're crazy. And so I ended up, after just like 3 emails, I got them down to $500. Because I am pretty smart about that stuff. I'm like, buddy, I don't need the .com, okay? It would be nice to have the .com, but I don't need the .com. And so once he realized I knew that, he was like, okay, well, what will you give me for it? $500.
Wow.
So that was good.
And that's a huge lesson is don't just rely on the registration, because first of all, you can have rights to obviously your brand in common law as well. You don't need to have it registered. Registration gives you a lot of benefits, and including the rights to actually have it, and then anyone else that tries to contest it would have to prove otherwise. So it's a lot easier to prove. It's a lot easier to file cease and desist letters against anyone else that tries to use your brand. And also the most important benefit is you get your attorney's fees and costs covered. So you're not paying out of pocket to defend yourself and protect yourself. And 2, you get statutory damages. And those are huge because attorney's fees alone in a trade infringement case can run you in the 6 figures plus, and I have dealt with them. So it is not cheap. It is highly evidentiary, and it takes a long time, and it doesn't guarantee you that you're going to win. And the other thing is that if you don't file, then you're not going to benefit of statutory damages, which means you're going to have to actually prove the losses that were made from someone using your name and brand, which is very hard to prove. And sometimes there may not be an actual loss, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't reap, some rewards of the damages. So those are huge benefits. But what I'm saying is there's still people that didn't register and they still have rights to names ahead of you. So it's definitely recommended. And we work with a service that actually goes through every single state and goes through, business registrations and other ways of learning about people's companies' names. And they'll be able to pull out common law searches. So Again, people who haven't registered. And then we also have a service that provides worldwide. And we did that with you, Melissa, to make sure, because as you're expanding your brand globally, and most companies are going global, right? If you're an e-commerce platform, essentially you can be anywhere. You want to make sure that you're protecting your brand globally. And if there's somebody else in, say, Europe, if you're wanting to go to Europe or Canada or somewhere else, and someone's using that name, well, obviously it's going to limit your expansion efforts. So before you put in the investment into a brand, make sure you have a name that you can actually invest in. And so that's why it's important. And these name search companies, honestly, for what it's worth, it's very minute, the amount of money that it will take to do the search. And it's very worth it, because as Melissa mentioned, 5,000 is the least amount that I've seen companies having to rebrand themselves because of cease and desist and infringement action. So
Shirin, when I did my EIN, I had to publish in a classified ad or something like that. Do you still have to do that? Like, you had to take an ad out or something
for
my LLC.
For the LLC, well, the state of New York is very different, and it's very barbaric in some ways. It's a great way of it making money. The state makes a lot of money. This is a very old law. And if you are in the state of New York, if you have an LLC, you have to pay, in addition to registration, what's called publication fees. And if you are registered your business in the 5 main boroughs of New York, right, you're going to have to pay around $1,100 to $1,200 just for the publication fees associated with an LLC. It's crazy, and it's debilitating.
And I had to do that.
We have solutions for that. Obviously, I mean, you may not have been aware of them, but now there's companies that I work with, and what they'll do is they're registered in places like Albany. So what we'll do is register the business in Albany and publicize it in Albany, which costs maybe $300 to do the publication. And then once the publication period is over, then you just re-register it back into your city where you're actually doing business. And that's a legitimate way around the publication costs of doing business in the 5 boroughs of New York. Yes.
That's crazy. Okay, so I know my Congresswoman, so I'm going to bring that up next time I see her, because that's a waste of money for a small business. That's just a ridiculous thing to have to do in this day and age. I can understand back in the, back when everybody was like reading the classifieds in the newspaper, I could understand that maybe was the time to do that. But yeah, it's one of those laws that needs to get off the book. So Diana has a question about trademarking internationally. And I ended up trademarking Fashion Mingle in Australia and in India in 2019, because we were going through the trademark process, and it was actually like I could save some money if I, did it all at the same time. And we were actually working in Australia and India at the same time. And so I felt uncomfortable doing promotions in those countries that are so far away. And then not having, someone on the ground that would be like protecting, our name. So I did go ahead and get the trademarks for that. What Diana's asking is, say if you are an e-commerce business, and you're in US, you have a US trademark, but you're going to start operating under the same name and the same niche in London, should she get a trademark to cover her work in London?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, if you're going to be doing business in any other jurisdiction, if you've got your trademark registered in the US, that's great. And if she set it up recently, you have 6 months, as you know, Melissa, you have 6 months from the time you register your trademark in a particular jurisdiction to actually extend the origination date to any other country that you file for. So so it's a preferential period. And so within that time frame, you can file for, well, now, there was a certain period of time where the UK and the EU were one. So you could have done like an EU registration. And now, of course, you can do registration in the UK, EU, India, Australia, wherever your consumers are and wherever you're doing business. It's really important to register your trademark and your business activities in those jurisdictions. Otherwise, yeah, how are you going to prevent yourself from someone else copying your business in a different jurisdiction? Because the US doesn't, the laws of the US don't apply to the other jurisdictions. So if you're an e-commerce platform and you see that, obviously you're based in the US, but you have a lot of customers in Italy, France, just get an EU registration. It'll help you. Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see. I know we've got a couple of other questions here. Okay, Ellen wanted to know where to go register your logo name. I just added the link to the government website and also the Whois database to check your website name. And then Christine wants to know, she said, I created a fashion project. How do you protect this creative class where we make a canvas? Do I trademark or copyright? So how do you protect art or a name?
So that's where copyright comes into play. And copyright basically protects the owner, the creator, and it creates, literary, artistic, musical works of art. So the art that you're mentioning, Christine, yes, that would be copyright registration. Music would be under copyright registration. Your blog, your website, that's all copyright registration. Your photography for your social media or your business, that's all, and even the write-up that you created for your business, that's all copyright. And again, I highly recommend that you go to the US Copyright Office and register your copyright if you know how to do it. And there are obviously nuances, and I always say, with trademark is slightly more complex because there's a huge process. But even with copyrights, if you don't do it right, you're going to get back an examiner's report asking you questions, and if you don't answer them, they immediately abandon you. So that's it. You only have one shot to really understand what you're doing and do it right, because otherwise then you're going to have to go to the appeals board, and then you're going to have to get an attorney. The process can be onerous if you don't know what you're doing. So if you do, or if you've seen somebody else doing it, great, you can take your chances, but absolutely register your literary works, your works of art, your photos, your write-ups, your blogs, anything that you've created that's original, of course. Mm-hmm. And again, the benefit of that is, and I can't tell you how many times I have seen this with clients, and the mess is very expensive. If you don't register your website, the content on your website, the photography that you created, you spent all that time and money and made these beautiful pictures of your products. If you don't register those with the Copyright Office, what can happen is someone else literally can copy and paste, create that on their own, create a new name for it. And I'm telling you, it's happened so often, and it's blatant. I mean, it's just blatant. And write it off as their own. And now you've got two problems. One is your brand reputation. So now as a consumer, how are you going to know who's the real you, right? Who's the imposter and who's the real you? There's two websites with the same pictures and the same content. And then there's brand confusion in the marketplace. And now you're trying to say, I'm the real, me. And in the consumer world, no one knows who you are. And, in the internet world. And so people all of a sudden, if they've had connections with the other company, now they're writing bad reviews about you and your services. And two, okay, so the company has taken this other infringer has taken your work. Sure, you can file a cease and desist and tell them to stop. If they don't stop, you're going to have to sue. And there's a lot of these people that are very brazen Because guess what? They did their homework and they saw that you did not register with the Copyright Office. Okay.
so
They know
did.
what they're doing.
Yeah.
Let me tell
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So guess what happens now? You're going to have to pay out of pocket to hire an attorney to litigate this case against the infringer. One, you're going to have to pay for your attorney's fees that are not reimbursable. Two, you're going to have to prove the damages. And again, how do you prove that what somebody else's website took away from your revenues? How do you prove that? It is incredibly hard and incredibly expensive. And so guess what happens? You end up saying, I can't afford it. I can't afford to protect my own, property. And so you let these people get away with it. And most of the times, what I've seen is companies, smaller companies, close business because they can't afford to protect their own stuff.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Can I say something? Do we have time or no?
Yeah, please do. Yes.
Okay, so I am the poster child of what not to do.
I love cautionary tales.
I definitely will write a book one day about that, but a lot of what Shirin said, I mean, I cannot even stress how important it is. The DIY does not apply to your business. And honestly, you need to get a freaking lawyer, because I had to sue somebody because they infringed on one of my quote unquote trademarks that I got through LegalZoom, and they didn't do their due diligence. So I had to do the double work, had to send a cease and desist letter. And even though I had common law, which means that I used that trademark name first, and there's a lot of ways to prove it. And thank God I saved every single receipt, every single paper, because once you make money on that name, it kind of protects you, sort of. But I had to get a lawyer. It took 6 years. I did win the lawsuit because I was like, I'm not letting this biatch steal my name, steal all the work I went through. I saved all my pennies, did not go on vacation or anything, but I won the trademark. But it was a lesson. And what's the lesson? The lesson is it is worth paying a lawyer to file your trademarks. I have 3 right now, because if you don't do that, you will pay at the end and it'll be worse. And so I cannot stress enough. Listen, ideas are ideas. Everybody has great ideas. Like Melissa said, there are hoarders of domains. I own 268 domains. Why?
I own a lot too.
Why? Because
That's a lot of projects.
I come up with all these ideas.
Yeah.
So I buy the domains right away. Blah, 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 blah. Because I was
Yep.
like, okay, that's for another 10 years. But what I'm all saying to you is, you gotta freaking register your name, your logo, make sure the logo's original. You have to, listen, it's a business. And if you're a real business person, you gotta you gotta do it the right way. I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah.
Do not do it on your own. You're not a lawyer. I should be a lawyer. After all the things I learned from that 6-year lawsuit, I learned so much of what not to do. So be a business person. If you put your big girl or panties on and get a lawyer.
And look how time consuming that was for you, 6 years. What you could
the
have done.
stress.
And thank God I had an amazing lawyer. I had to fire 2 lawyers.
Oh my God.
Find the 3rd lawyer who was amazing. He was like no joke.
Yeah.
And he won my
That's
case.
key.
Right, absolutely. Well, Taylene has a question. She says, if you've had a trademark done by a lawyer, is there any way to check that it has been done? So I'm not 100% sure what Taylene's referring to exactly. Is that if you have had a trademark done by a lawyer, they should have already done this, right? So does that mean, like, if a lawyer needs to be experienced in doing trademarks, so you can't get your cousin who's a criminal defense attorney to file your trademark, right? Would that not be a good idea?
Yeah, that's a key. Have a lawyer for each thing, because you have to go with lawyers that specialize. I've been burnt that way too. And I'm like the jack of all trades. I've learned, the hard knock life, and buying hundreds of domains, all of that. And I have a question for all of you, probably for Shirin, about the proof. You know, I'm like Dee also, save all the paperwork. You think you're dotting your I's, crossing your T's, everything seems fine until there's some legal challenge, and that could be 10 years down the road or whatever. And then you're like, oh my God, you know, how do you prove? You were talking about websites when you said like you have to have the proof and you know, have the damages, you know, logged. Do you like screenshot your website and like time stamp it or something? Like, what do you do like on a regular basis that you have just in a file stored away?
Well, first of all, that's such a great question, Dale. I recommend for everyone, regardless of whether you've registered it or you're still in the common law stage and you haven't registered your trademarks or copyrights, keep a folder in your you know, Dropbox or wherever your files are kept online, and create a folder. And that folder should enclose everything that you've done in association with your name. So from the moment that you created that logo with your designer, say, for example, correspondence with that designer, you know, dates of when those logos were going back and forth and being created, or the name. And then use in commerce. You want to show when it was first used in commerce. So like you mentioned, Dale, time stamping of your website and the name of your brand, and you know, on the website, your invoice, the name on your invoice and the date of that invoice that was sent out. Of course, you can block out, you know, confidential information on that, but just start storing a file folder for proof of your trademarks and your intellectual property file folder, essentially. And start separating all of your different marks and logos and things like that, and start keeping track of every time you've used it in a different way. The first time, as long as you used it the first time, that's really the most important time period. So keep a log of that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you have to renew your trademark. So you have to continue to prove that you're using it, because it's a monopoly essentially on that name and logo for that period of time on those products and services. So, you know, you can only maintain it if you continue to use it or lose it. So again, every few years, every 3 years, you have to, every 5 to 6 years, you have to prove that you're continuing to use it. And then, yes, there is a 10-year, but before the 10-year, it's between year 5 and 6, Melissa, that we have to prove that you're continuing to use it. Then you'll get it for the another 5 to 6 years. And then you got to continue to show that you're using it. So that folder always stays up to date with continued use of your brand through commerce, whether it's on your store, through marketing materials. You know, you go to a press event, whatever it may be, just have proof that you continuously used it, and time dates. Social media is great because, you know, you're advertising yourself and your company on social media. So that already has a timestamp of when you did this. And, you know, I had a client who created, you know, clothing. So obviously the first time that was put on social media for sale, it wasn't a website, it was just a social media post. But that was in e-commerce. So that was the time that they first used it. So there's different ways of proving it, but keep a folder and keep a file and keep it updated all the time.
So we're running over. And so I have one more question about like the cost of getting a trademark. But what I want to tell everybody is the two things we were going to cover today was about business insurance and managing your money. So like I said at the top of the hour, we're going to start, the fourth Friday of the month is going to be on a business topic. So the fourth Friday in February, be February 26th, that's going to be about intellectual property. And so we'll talk about, you know, NDAs, we'll talk about the trademark stuff, but I think then we go more into copyright. Because there was clearly, I mean, the fashion industry has a lot of concerns in that area. And then the fourth Friday in March, we'll talk about finances, where we'll talk about insurance and when all of that is needed. And I know Dell and Dee and Catherine been involved in a lot of events where insurance is very, very important. And then also we'll talk about ways to manage your money so you don't get in trouble with the IRS. So, so the final question for today is, basically, Shirin, can you tell us, like, if someone wanted to do the trademark DIY, which we're not recommending, what's the ballpark on that? And then if someone were to do a trademark through an attorney, what that would cost. And then also Diana wants to know if you file international trademarks, which you do because you did 2 for me. So talk about the cost for doing international as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you want to so filing a trademark basically requires you to pay the government filing fees. And right now, the filing fee is per class. As we mentioned, there's different classes of products and services. So you need to know where you fall in. And there are different classes for different things. Even technology can run into multiple classes. If it's one product, it could actually fall into several classes. So just think about that. So each class is $125 filing fee for that particular class. And then, of course, once you file for the class, then you'll get an examiner's report, and they're going to, most of the time, they're going to have questions and issues with your filing. Everyone is different. Every examiner is different. I've literally done the same thing for similar businesses and had different examiners question, one thing and not question the other one. So you never know who your examiner is going to be and what they're going to have issues with. And again, you're going to have to respond to those, to the inquiry. And that, if you don't do that well, within 6 months time, your trademark application will be abandoned, and that's it. And then you'll have to redo it again with a new date and a new time and pay those fees again. The other thing to think about if you're doing do it yourself is that, if you don't I just lost my train of thought. Okay. But the most important thing is that knowing the class of products and services, that's key.
Which that's very complicated, because I was shocked when you were going over it with me, and I was like, I wanted to just like kill myself actually looking at all those different classes. It was like, oh my gosh,
bringing that up. That's what brought me to my point. And if you don't know, so just saying your product does not necessarily mean that's the class. You have to explain it in a way that the trademark examiner is going to understand it. It has to be in a very technical term. So if it's not done in the way that the trademark examiner understands those. So if you're not working with a trademark attorney, even a business attorney, if they don't know trademarks, they're not going to know how to translate your products and services into a trademark application. So then, the other point I wanted to make is there's 2 parts to it. There's the use in commerce, which means those are the things that you're currently using right now in, and making money on, in trade. And then there's things that you haven't done yet. They're in the works, like, an apparel company that wants to do shoes down the line, or jewelry, for instance. So you want to cover those classes of services now, because guess what? In a few years, if you didn't do it, somebody else could come with something similar, not the same, of course, similar, but cover that class of services, and now they have first rights to it. So now you can't even expand into that class, and you have up to 3 years to then prove that you are eventually going to use that product or service in that class. But in the time period, you have to pay renewal fees to continue to extend the deadline. So there's a lot of nuances with trademarks. And if you don't do it right in any of those points, there's a lot of deadlines. If you don't meet those deadlines, that's it. You're done. And you have to start the process all over again. Right. So it's really important to make sure that you know what you're doing and do it right the first time. Because as Dee mentioned, if an attorney comes in and has to formulate and figure things out, they're going to charge you to actually review what happened first before they charge you to actually fix it. And then even then, it's not a guarantee that it's going to get fixed.
And who's liable if the lawyer screws up? like say I hired a lawyer, they did it wrong, then it's legally challenged. Is the business off the hook because they went through a professional, or?
Well, the problem is that you're going to lose out, right? If you didn't get the lawyer that knows what they're doing and they did it wrong, okay, well, you can sue the lawyer, for malpractice, essentially, but that's not going to win you out. It's another company while you were doing that. And I've seen this happen. Another company swishes by and registers that name, and now you're out. You're not going to be, that's a third party. They have nothing to do with you and your lawyer. So
yeah,
that's why you have to get someone that knows how to do it right. And so LegalZoom, I can't tell you how many horror stories I've had with LegalZoom, and we'll get to LegalZoom, Rocket Lawyer, all of those like template companies, because templates are just that. If you don't know what you're doing with a template, you might as well do it yourself, because there's really no point in you buying a template for a company that doesn't know who you are and what you're doing and how to protect you. You're just getting a template. So if you're not a lawyer, you're not going to know how to modify that template for your business, which means it's really not going to protect you. A template is really useless unless you know how to modify it. And that's the key to any template. It needs to be modified to your business. And, we'll get to that in another topic, but yeah, so work with a lawyer that knows what they're doing. And so my rates, I do it flat rate, because you don't pay for my time and the time that I've spent knowing what I know of 15 years of doing this. What you're going to pay for is my knowledge, and that's it. And we do it flat rate because I'm here to help businesses, develop and establish and set up their companies for success. It's not about, haggling for how much time I've spent doing this. I want to do it right, and I want to make sure that it works for you. So, working with a company like a lawyer that's going to do it flat rate for you, and a lawyer that knows what they're doing, that's the way to go.
Okay. And Shirin, could you add your email to the chat? And then that way, if people want to reach out to you directly to ask for what the prices would be for trademarking in the US, but also trademarking internationally, because I know it's hard to like really throw a number out there. But you're talking a couple of $1,000s at least, right?
So I manage global portfolios, as you know. So what we do is, I work with lawyers all over the world. And so you have to work with lawyers that are local in that jurisdiction. And depending on the jurisdiction, right, in London, you're dealing with pounds. So, the currency is much more expensive, or euros, versus, places like India, where the currency is not as expensive. So relatively speaking, that filing would be more inexpensive than a filing in the EU or, in China or somewhere like that. So it all depends on the jurisdiction and how much they charge. But generally, because I have a network of lawyers that I work with and I know them, we basically get the prime rate for all the clients that we work with.
Yeah, and it did go really smooth, us getting the Fashion Mingle India and the Fashion Mingle Australia trademark. But you did have to come back to me and say, okay, well, they won't approve it unless we do X, Y, Z. And so we did have to do a little bit of back and forth. And so it was very comforting knowing that, Shirin had, was the expert in here and was looking out for our best interests. And, and I think that's what's really key too. And I just want to say, I've used Shirin for many different things for Fashion Mingle. And, I know she cares that it's done right and that we're well protected. And you can see she can really explain things in a way that you can understand, especially if you're someone, who isn't comfortable with legal stuff and things like that. So, well, I will thank you everybody for hanging around and going through all of this. We will have our member networking happy hour. Well, you can bring wine if you want. Shirin's still in Montenegro, so she's got her wine right there. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. So, but we will have it at 1 o'clock, East Coast time. And, you know, definitely spread the word. We want to have a really great networking opportunity, and this will be a chance for you to say, you know, you know, here's who I am, here's what I do, and here's what I need. And then everybody can share in chat resources and opportunities that will help you. Okay. And so if you want to participate in the Zoom part of it, you just need to be a featured member or a VIP member. And so we'll send out an email to members to let them know about that. But then if you are a free member of Fashion Mingle, you can still participate the way you're participating today. Okay. So thanks everybody. Have a great weekend. See you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Great, great. Thanks.